I am joined by Robert Griffin III, James White, Field Yates Meanakeims.
All right, so first play we're going to look at 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
What is going on, everybody? It's Mike Kadlick here. It's Taylor Kyles there, and we are back with another episode of the Patriots Daily podcast, powered by Prize Picks. And today, Taylor, we're powered by a Patriots transaction. Jeremiah Farms Jr. The Patriots are retaining the defensive lineman, so we'll get into that in a second. But the way we're going to do it is because of this, it kind of trickled into, all right, well, let's talk about who else the Patriots could re-sign this offseason. They do have some pending free agents, exclusive rights free agents like Farms is, a bunch of UFAs as well. The Jacoby Brissett's of the world, Dietrich Wise, John Jones. We're going to get into all those guys and kind of rattle through those. Some of them will go more in depth. Some of them will go rapid fire and take a quick audit at who is outgoing and who the Patriots should bring back. And then we'll finish up the mailbag questions from yesterday. So with that being said, Patriots did retain Jeremiah Farms Jr. He was, like I said, an ERFA. It's a 2-year deal, and I'm reading from Mike Reese, who had a bunch of the nitty-gritty, which is expected to include a $100K signing bonus and $250K guaranteed. Another note, if Farms is in fact on the roster this season, he would avoid the restricted free agent process in 2026 because right now he's exclusive because he only has, I think, 2 years of playing time, so he's not technically a vested veteran yet. So that's where this comes into play. Essentially him, as well as Alex Austin, who we'll get to, if the Patriots tender them a league minimum deal, they're basically required to sign it. So they do retain Farms for the 2 years. So I want to get your thoughts on it. I know you've been a big Farms fan over the last couple seasons. Played a lot more this year than he did the past season in his second year and put some pretty good film on tape, all things considered. So your thoughts on this one before we get into the rest of the guys that they could potentially bring back.
Yeah, I like the re-signing. I thought it made a lot of sense for a guy like Terrell Williams, who he likes violence, he likes effort, and I think those are two words that describe Jeremiah Farms' game. I also think switching to more of the 4-down front, having a little bit more of an attacking mentality maybe will work with Farms because when he's at his best, he's just shooting into gaps. Like sometimes he's laid off the ball, but when he's on, man, he's usually out of his stance and attacking linemen's hands before they seem to really know what's going on. I feel like he could maybe take over that Daniel Equale role. We'll get to him later, where he is the kind of well-rounded sub at defensive tackle. Last year, he was D-tackle 3 behind Devon Godshaw, and then Daniel Equale. Jaquelin Roy also kind of was in the mix with him in that DT3, DT4 role before he got hurt. But ideally, I think Farms is more of like a 4-string kind of guy. Now, again, he does bring some ability to stop the run. He brings some pass rush value. I think the pass rush value is where he stands out the most because in their 5-down fronts, he was more of the defensive end type, like a Dietrich Wise or Christian Barmore. Their 4-man fronts, he was more of that 3 technique. Sometimes he'd be the nose tackle, but typically he was trying to get upfield and really win one-on-one battles. And then even in pass rush situations, he took over Barmore's role where he would be that single nose tackle in the middle when they had their 3-man rush fronts. That was Farms, and it kind of fit his skill set. So it's not like a crazy signing, and I think that really he's going to have to compete for his job. This isn't the kind of signing, of course, where he's guaranteed a spot, but considering how hard he's worked, great story, Jeremiah Farms. He's 28 right now, but worked his butt off just to get to the NFL. I believe from the Friends School, went through different types of programs, finally lashed on with the Patriots in 2022, has been on offense, he's been on defense, and finally was able to capitalize on a bigger role. Not quite as much as I wanted. I will say that against double teams, he can get blown out of his gaps. He wasn't as consistent as I wanted to see for him getting more snaps, but the flashes are there for sure. He had some really impressive quick wins on tape. Again, both run and pass. So you're hoping he can continue to grow under Terrell Williams, who got a lot out of guys who weren't really household names last year with the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, his story, I think he was in the UFL for a little while. You mentioned, he comes undrafted out of Friends University, and someone who, talking about these exclusive rights free agents, a lot of these guys are, guys who were undrafted, have been to teams, been released, and so they've never really went through a contract, but they're 22, 23 years old, where he's 28 sitting here. It's a late bloomer in the league, but again, super cool story, an inspiring one as far as, never giving up and keeping your head down and working, and now he ends up reaping the benefits of it. So we'll see if he can catch on. Go ahead.
And I wanted to throw out these stats just to kind of put his impact into perspective. As really their 3rd-string guy in a pretty heavy rotation last season, he led all of their, not a high bar, I will say that, he led all their defensive tackles, and I believe it was pass rush win rate. and either pass rush win rate or pressure rate. Either way, he was at the top of the position group. He also only trailed Devon Gotcha in tackles for loss or gain versus run or pass. So again, it was an interior defensive line group that was not very good last season, but as a guy who you'd hope is really more of a depth piece, he was one of the more productive players.
For sure. All right, let's go through the rest of them, Taylor. Patriots have some outgoing free agents. Some guys have been here a long time. Some guys have not. Some are old. Some are young. And we'll start with 31-year-old former Super Bowl champion Jonathan Jones. Someone who has been here. He's been through it. He was undrafted. He came in. He's obviously made an impact, but now he enters unrestricted free agency. A guy who commands the room. He's the elder statesman there now with a bunch of young guys, frankly, in someone like Alex Austin who could be back, Christian Gonzalez, obviously, Marcus Jones, those guys. So in your opinion, is this someone who the Patriots should hang on to, or do you see him more on the outside looking into this season?
It's tough because you're talking about a new regime where guys like Dietrich Wise, guys like Jonathan Jones, who are part of Super Bowl winning teams, who have been captains or at the very least leaders on this defense, you'd think, yeah, they're probably going to come very cheap. They probably wouldn't really want to play anywhere else or would prefer to stay in New England.
Right.
Those two combined, you're thinking, hey, at least bring them in, see what they look like in the summer. If they've really lost a significant step, you get rid of them. If they still have a little something, maybe you keep them as depth pieces. But Mike Vrabel doesn't have any loyalty to Jonathan Jones, and he also typically likes more size, I think, on the outside. That's why Jonathan Jones and, frankly, Marcus Jones, I think their jobs are in trouble. So not only are they maybe not scheme fits for what Mike Vrabel's going to want to do in his more quarters-heavy scheme. We'll get into some of the more schematic stuff later this week and some changes to expect. Look forward to that. But even looking at the numbers, like they were not pretty. When you look at Jonathan Jones's stats, he allowed the highest passer rating in the NFL last season. I didn't look for specific positions or anything like that. No real crazy qualifiers. If you were targeted 30 times, you did not have a higher passer rating allowed than Jonathan Jones. Third highest on that list, unfortunately, was Kyle Duggar. Both of these guys are veterans that are, nearing their 30s or in their 30s. You understand, especially with Kyle Duggar, the ankle injury that he had for most of last season, kind of like Jonathan Jones, he showed incredible toughness. They both did. And I want to take my hats off to them. But at cornerback, where you can get exposed so easily, as we saw against the Rams with John Jones, like, yes, he was put in some tough spots with their motion, their play action, but also there were times you're just thinking, fundamentally, it didn't really look like him. Saw it again against Ladd McConkey, where, the guy who just barely is right under a 4.4, really exposed the fact that Jonathan Jones just doesn't have the speed that he used to have. So for all of those reasons, even though his toughness last season was incredible, he's a great leader in that room and one of the few holdovers they have from those Super Bowl winning teams. I just don't know that Jonathan Jones is going to be a fit in this new regime. I think they're probably going to try to go a different direction, whether that's going with the younger guys on the roster that have more size, like Isaiah Bolden, maybe bringing back Alex Austin, whether that's free agency, Carlton Davis, who played with Terrell Williams in Detroit last season, what have you. Even Elijah Molden, a guy who was a safety last year for the Chargers, was a slot defender for the Titans when Mike Vrabel was there. Maybe you bring one of those guys in that you have more familiarity with, but John Jones, I just think the fact that he isn't physically where he used to be and doesn't really have a lot of supporters with no more, Mayo, Covington, Pellegrino, all those guys, even though he did show some safety versatility, he wasn't enough of a playmaker for me to say, hey, he can be a Devin McCourty type. I didn't really see that kind of impact, so it's probably going to be an out for me on John Jones. Yeah,
I mean, look, he's a guy who the leadership qualities are one thing, and they obviously matter, right? He's someone who's been around here and understands the culture. But you also mentioned the culture on the other end. Like, it's a different culture now. Those guys are gone. Mayo's gone. Like, this is another brand new regime. And, John Jones mentioned earlier this week, I'm reading from NBC Sports Boston, Phil Perry was out at the Super Bowl, and he said, a goal of mine is to be in one place my entire career, but more importantly, getting back to winning football. And I think Braves can bring that culture back to New England. So, saying all the right things, but on the Patriots end, are they going to, pay up for him? And not that he's going to garner a ton of money, but, they shouldn't overextend themselves for a guy like this either. Let's just call it what it is. And so, if he wants to come back and stay with the Patriots and, values being in one place and they can come to a middle ground, then sure. But again, overextending for somebody like that, I don't see it happening. I think not that you don't need to go younger at the position, but his value isn't like it was here before. And frankly, if they're going to lowball him, he should go out and get his. He's been around. He should go try and win, right? If he could latch on to, I don't want to say Kansas City because they lost, a Philly or something. They need a back end corner or something. Like, he should go do that instead. So I'm with you. I do lean out unless there's some sort of middle ground that they can find. Let's go to quarterback, Jacoby Brissett. I think this one's easy, but with Mike Vrabel coming in with some Cleveland and Browns ties there. I know Josh McDaniels has coached Brissett in the past as well. So I do wonder if they do bring him back in some sort of capacity as someone to back up Drake May, but you also have Joe Milton in the building. So want to get your thoughts on Brissett's fit here and if you think they could bring him back.
Yeah, so it does make sense because you have Josh McDaniels, you have Ashton Grant, two guys who worked with Jacoby Brissett. So it's going to be a system that he's somewhat familiar with or is familiar with in multiple ways. That said, when you look at the numbers from last season, I'm not trying to pick on Jacoby, but when you go back to those first 5 weeks, it really just was not good. He had one of the slowest releases in the NFL. He wasn't pushing the ball downfield and trying to make big plays because he was trying so hard to protect the ball. But then in his last couple starts, the ball security kind of waned, and that just exacerbated the fact that production-wise, he just wasn't giving you enough to justify being the starter. Obviously, Drake May takes over in week 6. Now, Brissett did take over in that Jets game, lead them to a win. That was pretty huge, and he did show the ability to come in when they needed him and, give you a little something. But you also saw Joe Milton, his ability to create outside of structure. And it's going to be really hard to justify bringing Jacoby back and making him QB2 when Joe Milton obviously not playing the same caliber of opponent. Like, yes, he was playing with a similar type of supporting cast with not very good blocking, not great receivers, and not much of a run game. But Joe Milton was playing backups in, Jacoby Brissett's going against the Jets, the Niners, the Seahawks, the Bengals. Like, not exactly easy defenses to go up against, so it's not the same. But I think you'd rather have Joe Milton out there and see what he's got than Jacoby Brissett knowing how much he's going to limit your team. Now, if they make some improvements to the roster, maybe he's not as much of a, for lack of a better term, kind of dead weight as he was with the Patriots last season and no help. But at the same time, I also think Jacoby's going to want to try to get out there and see if he can start and at least be a top backup and not a QB3. So for those reasons, I'm not sure how much sense it makes to bring Jacoby back. He filled his role. He helped Drake May in the first season of his career. Now Drake's got Josh. Maybe you get another veteran like a Joe Flacco. He's not a Josh McDaniels guy, but he was in that Cleveland system. So Ashton Grant may have some familiarity there. Or maybe somebody else that Josh has some familiarity with on the market. But yeah, I just don't see Jacoby coming back.
How about a dual threat Brian Hoyer doing the quick snap and then being a backup here too? He joked about it on the pod. I don't see that happening. I think he's out. But no, I mean, I'm with you. I hate putting qualifiers on all of these, but I mean, for the right price, I'd take anyone back. Like again, if Jacoby wants to stick around for cheap money and just be a backup and work with Josh and work with Drake like he did last year, then yeah, come back, right? I mean, it's easier to have him in the room to, we helped with the Van Pelt system and now we can help with Josh's system. But I mean, this is a guy who sounded like he was on his way out at the back end of last year. You mentioned he already did his job with Drake. It'd be one thing if it was another rookie and he would have a chance to start for a little while and be that bridge. But what's done is done. Yes, he was a great help. I think Drake even said during a Pro Bowl or Super Bowl interview last week, he was asked who his favorite teammate was, and he said Jacoby Brissett. So he clearly, he did his job, he did his role, but I'm with you. I think you roll with Joe Milton and, another veteran backup. Even like, I can't think of a name, but someone in that realm where it could just be a camp arm who has been in the system before. He works with them over training camp for the first couple months. Roster cuts happen, and you work forward with Drake May from there. The veteran backup is not nearly as important as it was a year ago with Drake May. So I'm with you for those reasons. I am also out on Jacoby Brissett. All right, flipping it to the defensive side of the football.
Oh, actually, real quick, I was looking at the market, seeing who was a free agent. Jarrett Stidham. There you go. Perfect backup.
Oh, yeah. He went with Josh to L.A. or Vegas.
Vegas, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If that's someone who would, and he's really good friends with David Andrews.
Friends with David Andrews. And is he friends with Brian Hoyer?
He must be. I think
Probably.
He was here. Yeah.
So yeah, all those guys are here. And the fact that in Denver, they already have Zach Wilson as a backup.
Right.
He's younger. I don't know how they feel about him, but obviously he gives you a little bit more juice than does Stidham. So Stidham would make a lot of sense as a backup.
Good find. That's a very good find. I need to keep that in the back of my head. And I kind of.
Or Jameis. Jameis was saying he wouldn't mind being the backup either.
Hey, if Jameis wants to come here, Jameis can come here. He's worked with Grant before, not McDaniels, but that would be Again, I think Jameis is a more realistic option than Jacoby at this point. I think Jacoby is pretty much, out the door. So, no, good find with Jarrett Stidham. That would make a ton of sense. All right, Dietrich Wise Jr., Patriots captain for a long time here. He is, I believe he's now on the other side of 30. He's, he's getting up there in age. Is this someone who you can see them bringing back, or is this sort of the Jonathan Jones where, they're on the back end of their Patriots career, different path for the Patriots, and you're just going in a different direction?
I think you go in a different direction here. And I was kind of back and forth on this because I think Dietrich Wise would actually benefit from them using more 4-down fronts. I think a lot of his career, he's been miscast as the defensive end kind of forward technique, really just inside the tackles, where he's got to handle double teams and go head up against offensive tackles. And I never thought that was his game, even though I think he got up to like 285, 290 pounds, so he could handle that kind of force. It was never really his game. He's always been more of a pure 4-down defensive end type, which is the scheme they're going to. And when you look at his bad plays compared to his positive plays, there's way more positive plays for Dietrich Wise when he's in that role outside the tackles than when he's on the inside, or whether are negative plays when he's outside. Now, that said, there were some serious issues. Now, one, when you look at the numbers, you'll see he's been in decline for the past couple seasons. Now, 2022 is when his snap count kind of skyrocketed. That was when he had one of, if not the best season of his career, or at least really in the latter part of his career. Then you see that it's gone down. One, he hasn't played as much in the past 2 seasons. His pass rush win rate actually did go up from where it was last season, but it's still the lowest it's been in a few seasons, and his pressure rate is the lowest it's been. A lot of that is the fact that he's just not very quick, and the older he gets, I feel like just he's not moving the same way. So it's just another added quarter of a second or tick that it takes him to get to the quarterback, and that makes it tougher. Also, contain was a pretty big issue for him last season. I feel like there was like once every other week, or in any game that we discussed contain as an issue, Dietrich had at least one lapse. He also had some really weird penalties, like a couple horse collars, I think, at least one. I think it was 2. Just some really weird mental mistakes that you wouldn't expect from a captain, someone who's won Super Bowls, who's been on this team for a long time. So while he does still give you that seniority, the Super Bowl experience, and all that, I think it makes more sense if Terrell Williams goes out and gets one of his guys who is in Detroit, who's got a little less tread on the tire, maybe fits the scheme even better and has some familiarity than it does to bring Dietrich Wise back. Again, he would be super inexpensive. Pretty much everybody on this list is going to be inexpensive. They're Patriots free agents.
Right.
So, it's not like you're breaking the bank for Dietrich, but I just think, like Jonathan Jones, for a guy who's going to be 30 years old this season, it's just time to move on, bring in some guys that you're more familiar with and who just aren't quite as long in the tooth, I'll say.
Yeah, and I don't know how much this really matters in the grand scheme of things. Money's money, and decisions, go past this. And not that it's the same situation as Duron Mayo coming back, but like it's, shit happens and then you reset and you have a job to do. But for what it's worth, he didn't seem thrilled about the way Duron Mayo was,
That's another part of it. Yeah. I wish I could have. I saw him actually outside of the convention center when I was at media week, but I was literally dripping sweat and like thought I was going to pass out. I was wearing a hoodie like an idiot, and it was like the hottest day. It was sunny. It was 75. And I was talking to him for 2 seconds, and I was like, I feel so rude, but I need to get the hell out of here because I probably look insane right now, and I just need AC so badly. I would have asked him a little bit more, but I was dying. But yeah, we knew in the locker room that he clearly was not happy about the move. So I wonder how open he would even be to coming back under this new regime. But it also does feel like most people have gotten over it. But again, not everyone had the same reaction that he did. So that definitely plays a factor as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, I wouldn't put too much value on that. But at the same time, it happened. He was upset by it. Again, it's been, a month now, and if you don't have anywhere else to go and the Patriots the only team calling, then you're still going to, take in a paycheck. So we'll see what happens there. But I'm with you, probably a no. I think they move in a different direction. I like the idea of you mentioning Terrell Williams as someone he's more familiar with as a veteran option as well. But speaking of other veteran options along the defensive line, Daniel Akwale is an unrestricted free agent. Would you bring him back, or would you let him go as well?
Another one, he's just getting up there in age. Now, I got to give the guy credit. He played way more than anybody could have possibly expected him to. I feel you could see it like took a toll on his body. He was always like rubbing what I think is like icy hot or something on him in the locker room. Like he was banged up, and there were times where people would call out the times where he would kind of get blown out of his gap or it looked like he wasn't giving a ton of effort. And honestly, I think the guy was just gassed at times where they're getting run on. He's playing all these snaps. And we've known Equale as more of a pass rusher who was decent against the run. I've been saying for years that he was better against the run than he got credit for. This year, that got pushed to its limit where I think he played so much and was also injured in 2023, is getting older. I think he might have just lost a step because when you look at his pass rush effectiveness, it just was not there. He actually had the lowest pressure rate among interior defensive linemen who had at least 300 pass rushes. And it wasn't really close. He was the only person who was under 4%, wow. 2.5% pressure rate. Now, he was pretty solid against the run, and that's where you really got to give him credit. The guy held on. He's got shorter arms, which I mentioned before, and you can really see in his run defense. It makes it hard for him to get off of tackles and make tackles. He actually only had one miss in run defense, which I thought was kind of shocking because it feels like he falls off tackles a lot, but it's more because he doesn't get off blocks very consistently. It really stinks that potentially the last year of his career in New England went the way it did, where he had to play a lot of snaps. He was on a bad defense where he was overutilized. But again, you can do better in terms of depth. I think Jeremiah Farms can maybe take that mantle. I hope that you sign a free agent, also bring at least one guy in through the draft and really try to stack the interior so you're not put in the position like you were last year where you have no pass rush on the inside and some run defense, but it's not great. So yeah, as much as I appreciate what Daniel Equale has done for the Patriots in his career, I think it's time to move on.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's different, but it's also along the same lines as Wise, where like, you got what you cut out of him, but it's basically time. New scheme, which we'll talk about tomorrow, new defensive coordinator. And a lot of these guys, frankly, like you mentioned them being, Patriots free agents, the Patriots have one of the worst rosters in football. Like, call it what it is. And, Equale, good dude, did his job type of thing. But like, he's no one that you need to overextend yourself for. So I'm with you there. All right.
Also, apparently we're getting in trouble for nitpicking when the entire point of this exercise is to explain why some free agents may or may not be re-signed. I'm sorry. These are conversations that need to be had. Yes, the defense was bad. There are some players like Jeremiah Farms where they made some positive contributions and you may want to see what they've got left. And there were other guys who didn't make as much of a positive impact and are getting older, and you've got to acknowledge that and talk about whether or not they should move on. So I'm sorry if this sounds mean. I think we're being as fair as we possibly can be.
Exactly. Don't listen. But I know this again.
Just gotta acknowledge, I'm sensitive.
No, you're right. That is the exercise, and that no, you're right. You got, because you look at the comments and it's like, what are you guys doing? But we got it. It's a daily podcast. We got to go. We got to try something out here, and it's also
content. It's about the machine.
Yeah, exactly.
The algorithm.
Feed the machine, feed the algorithm, but also, it's a fun exercise for us and some people to look at too, kind of going person by person and see how they're gonna ultimately rebuild this team. And speaking of a bunch of 30-year-olds, one 30-year-old, the first one I believe that we're actually going to say yes to is tight end Austin Hooper, someone who came in last year, 1-year contract, worked with Alex Van Pelt, worked with TC in some capacity, I believe, when he was the tight ends coach, and comes in here last year and plays really well not really behind, but as another tight end with Hunter Henry, a veteran presence who Drake May seemed to really build a solid chemistry with. So I think I know the answer, but would you bring back Austin Hooper under Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels?
Yeah, I'm hoping this isn't going to be like the Pharaoh Brown situation where it's like, oh my God, this depth tight end was awesome. Obviously, he's going to come back because he's not going to ask for much. And then they actually don't bring him back. Now, Hooper, I think, is different. One, because he's played on a Mike Vrabel coach team. I believe he did. Let me just triple check because I think that was the year that we thought he was in Cleveland. I'm pretty sure is when he was in Tennessee. But he's played for so he spent 2020 to 2021 with the Browns. Then he was with the Titans in 2022, the Josh McDaniels Raiders in 2023, and then the Patriots in 2024.
Connection too. That's right. Okay.
Exactly. Let me make absolutely sure that Ashton Grant was on the Browns at that time. Yeah, he was. He had a Bill Walsh diversity coaching fellowship, so They probably don't have a relationship or anything. But there's a ton of people who are already familiar with Austin Hooper to some degree, so it makes all the sense in the world. He's not going to break the bank. He was actually. Kayshon Boutte was the only player on the offense who had more deep catches than Austin Hooper did. I think that Boutte had 6, Hooper had 3, and then Hunter Henry had 2. Those were the only people who had multiple deep catches. Really sad, but still, hey, go Hunter Henry. He was super reliable, ripped off some huge gains on tight end screens. And then when you actually look at the numbers, he was really good as a blocker as well. He was a top 10 blocker in the NFL, caught pretty much everything that came his way. Also, he and Drake had pretty good chemistry, which really showed downfield where he would just kind of put it in Hooper's area. Hooper would go get it. I'm not sure if this is 100% true. I feel like Hooper had at least one drop, but according to PFF, he had no drops, obviously tied for the fewest among tight ends, was also just very efficient. Anytime he was targeted, he usually made the most of it, on top of, again, being a very good blocker. Was used as their inline tight end or their wide tight end, so Hunter Henry could kind of be moved around, play fullback, be off the ball so he could be used in motion, different things like that. So Austin Hooper is one of the most no-brainer re-signings, I think. He can't be re-signed right now, but once that window opens, I would expect him to be maybe not a day one guy. I don't think he's going to be a priority necessarily, but I think that one is like signed, sealed, delivered unless he gets attention from someone else, which it sounded like last offseason he didn't. Maybe this season kind of gets him back on people's radars a little bit, but if he's like less than $5 million, I don't know why the Patriots wouldn't try to bring him back.
But it would also be one thing, too, if a guy like Alex Van Pelt had latched on to somewhere already, right? Or even, Bob McNell, who we worked with last year. Like, those guys are out of the league right now, and therefore, I don't know if there's like another – there's definitely not a more perfect fit for Austin Hooper in the league right now, but even a team that might go kind of try and poach him, maybe the Browns call him back or something like that. But it seems like the right fit for him, to return to New England. And again, a second security blanket really for Drake May last year outside of just Hunter Henry. I mean, the two of them were great. He really likes his tight ends, so keep it going. Glad you mentioned the Josh connection too. He has connections pretty much ever on the staff, so it would make a lot of sense for him to return. All right, back to the defensive side of the ball. A safety, Jalen Hawkins. Are you in or out on Jalen Hawkins?
I'm out. He just didn't do much for me last season. I feel like the team liked him a lot, and I tried to understand it. He, made a play here and there, but I can't really remember a Jalen. Can you remember a Jalen Hawkins play?
Not like one. No, not that one that stands out in my head.
Not really. That wasn't the case with Adrian Phillips. It wasn't the case when Jabril Peppers was a third safety. So I'm kind of at the point where I'm like, hey, man, this is a new team. Again, Elijah Molden, maybe they bring him in as a third safety. Another thing that's very big with this new regime is Mike Vrabel didn't use, and I'll get deeper into this, but he didn't use three safety nickel as much as the Patriots did, where that was really more of their base defense, or instead of like a 3-4 or 4-3 or whatever, they'd use that sometimes, but really against base packages, they would have three safeties instead of basically as a substitute for a linebacker, rather than using three defensive backs like the Bills. They don't really care what you're in. They're going to send out Teron Johnson as that third cornerback no matter what. So I think the value of the third safety is going to go down. And when you have Marte Mapu and Del Pettis already on the roster under contract for a few more seasons, I think if you're going to add somebody, you'd maybe want it to be a younger guy who you think can develop and compete more, or just someone that you have familiarity with. So I'm just going to show this. I'm not trying to pick on Jalen Hawkins, but I just want to put into perspective the fact that when you look at the conversion rate allowed in coverage among safeties, he wasn't targeted a ton. This was with a minimum of 15 targets. I think he was targeted like 17 times, but he had one of the highest conversion rates allowed in the NFL, or at least at the safety position. Again, I'm not trying to pick on him, but he wasn't making a ton of plays in the run game, wasn't doing a whole lot in coverage either. So I know he participated in special teams, but didn't make a ton of plays in that phase either. So yeah, I think it makes sense for them to try to make an upgrade there.
Yeah, I'm with you. I won't harp on the guy either. I think I don't even want to say he did his job, because you said that there wasn't really much that stood out. But a guy that came in, did his best. It's hard to vouch and justify for a lot of these guys that were on this team last year. So it wouldn't hurt me if they move on from Jalen Hawkins.
Great guy, though. Great guy. He's always very excited to answer questions. Awesome guy in the locker room. And that's what sucks about this exercise.
Right.
That's just the business. You like guys, they go on to different teams. That's
it's the business, and that's what you get when you're covering a 4-13 team. All right, let's get into a couple of guys that we are in on. But first, before we do, quick word from our friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all, and all you have to do is pick more or less on at least two players, and you get a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. So run your game all season long with us on PrizePicks. And this coming weekend is All-Star Weekend in the NBA, and PrizePicks is the best place to win cash while watching your favorite players during the game. And on Saturday night's events, you got the 3-point contest, the dunk contest, the skills challenge, all that and more will be loaded up on PrizePicks headed into this weekend. So do you think Steph Curry will get more than 5 3-pointers next week? Do you think Giannis will have more than 35 points in the All-Star game? Come hang out with us on Prize Picks and cook up those hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season. And all you got to do is download the app and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS on the Prize Picks app, and you get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, back to it here. A couple re-signings that we are in on, and we will start, Taylor, with... Actually, I don't know if I agree with this one, but go with it. Joey Sly, kicker. What do you think? In or out?
I think he's in,
Okay.
but that's more a function of there not being a lot of great kickers out there right now. Like Nick Folk's probably the only guy that I'd bring in over him, and I don't think Nick Folk is coming back, even though he did. Did he play for? Yeah, he did play for Vrabel 2 seasons ago. Yeah, he played for Vrabel, but again, I think that he wanted to be closer to his family. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to bring him back. I think if anything, you bring in Joey Sly with the intention of bringing in drafting a kicker in one of the later rounds and hopefully going that direction by the end of camp. But the reason against Joey Sly, he had the 6th lowest field goal conversion rate in the NFL among guys who I believe attempted at least 25 kicks. There were about 23 of them. He was one of 6 kickers to miss from less than 30 yards out also. He only missed once, but when you compound that with the fact that he was bottom 10 in every other range, like 30 to 39, 40 to 49, 50 plus, it's hard to really defend him. But when you look at other free agent kickers, he made the most. I think he and Nick Folk tied. Folk didn't miss one, which is crazy. He was, I think, 6 for 6. I think that Sly was 6 for 7. But those two made more 50-plus yard field goal attempts than any of the other free agents. Although I know whoever the Commanders kicker is, I'm forgetting his name for some reason. Like 3 or something like that. Commanders kicker.
Zane Gonzalez.
No, that's old. What the hell? That's not. Why is this not recent? Austin Siebert. Austin Siebert is like automatic, but he's not good from 50 plus. So if they want to go with just, hey, somebody who we know can nail the easy stuff, then sure, I could see Joey Sly being out. But just because I don't think the market's all that good, and again, Nick Folk doesn't seem like somebody that would come back to New England, I think they do bring back Joey Sly as more of competition in camp.
Competition, and again, they're running it back with the special teams group with
true.
Obviously Behringer and Cardona, but also the coaches in Springer and Tom Quinn. So there's some ease there as far as there's no, again, it's just, I don't want to say it's just kicking, but it's not like you can't bring in a guy and get him going, but they have familiarity there. So I agree, I guess, on the fact that it's more of a camp conversation and see what happens there. So I don't hate it, but here's one who I agree with. Alex Austin, Taylor, are you in or out on the Patriots retaining Alex Austin, who is, again, an exclusive rights free agent as he still does not have 2 vested years in the league? So to bring him back, they only need to offer a qualifying offer. But do you think they'll do it, and do you think they should do it?
So I want to start with, I need to see more of Alex Austin. I need him to have a really strong summer if he comes back, strong spring as well. I need him to be available, and I need him in the lineup early and often. Because he's had strong ends to the past 2 seasons with the Patriots, but he missed almost all of last season. One of his last plays was the Allen Lazard screen where he dragged the guy's shirt and still couldn't bring him down. So those are the things I want to see. One, more availability, and I also want to see him more consistent as a tackler. I don't think he lacks effort, but I think consistency and angles, he could definitely be better. Also, when it comes to man coverage situations in tight bunches or stacks and things like that, I'd like to see him be more consistent in his communication and working around those things. That said, like I mentioned, Alex Austin has had very impressive ends to the past 2 seasons. This year, he was one of the best deep defenders at his position and in the NFL. So he was targeted deep or downfield, so 10 or more air yards 10 times. He allowed 1 catch. The only catch was against the Bills, and it was during an end of half situation where he kept the clock running. So it was actually, yes, you gave up yards, but it was actually a heads-up play by him. He also has forced an incompletion on half of those downfield targets, hasn't allowed a touchdown. He's the only player to be targeted downfield at least 10 times and allow that completion rate and have half of his of those targets actually forced incomplete. So, sorry. I just wanted to hide for a second. Felt a little shy. But strong end of the season. Also, I think in the zone scheme where you've seen a lot of Alex Austin's success is in off coverage. Like last year, he had 1 interception on Josh Allen where he kind of baited him. He almost had the pick when he was in against the Steelers, against an out route. Looked a lot like Jack Jones. There was another play he had this season where he was in quarters coverage, I think against Alec Pierce, was able to run stride for stride with him downfield and break up a post that was pretty accurate from Anthony Richardson. So I really like Alex Austin. I think he's got the skills to be a complementary kind of field sort of corner in this quarters and more zone coverage heavy scheme. Although the Titans do play a lot of man coverage on like third downs and obvious pass situations. But for those reasons, and the fact that he is an exclusive rights free agent, it's very unlikely that someone's actually going to try to steal him from you. So makes all the sense in the world for me to bring Alex Austin back. I don't love the idea of him being like penned in or even penciled in as a starter necessarily, but I do like the idea of, okay, here's a guy who's really played some good ball for us at times. Let's also bring in some competition and see where he fits in, or maybe even if he can fit into the slot where we saw him at times last season. I think if he could be a slot defender for them, that'd be huge.
Yeah, the exclusive rights is the key here. I wouldn't go and, on a bidding war for Alex Austin if he was truly on the market, but the fact that you can bring him back as easy as you can with those ERFAs, I think it makes all the sense in the world. And finally, well, not finally, because we're going to do a rapid fire one on a bunch of the rest of these guys, but Christian Ellis is the big one. Really a core special teamer up until last season across both his stops rather in Philly and New England, but comes in here and plays pretty well for all things considered last season on the defensive side of the football. So would you re-sign Christian Ellis?
I would. Again, he is a restricted free agent, still similarly easy to retain, like similar to Jeremiah Farms. Now, I will say Christian Ellis was like not a perfect soldier necessarily. It was his first season as a full-time or really heavily involved on the defensive side of the ball. He kind of was with the Eagles, but not to this extent. And you could see it, right? His recognition wasn't great. There were so many times where he was either going the wrong way or was a step behind and seemed like he didn't know what he was doing. That's also because his coaching wasn't great. He had a rookie coach in Dante Hightower who admitted himself that he was kind of overwhelmed at times. That said, Christian Ellis initially showed up as a blitzer. I think in San Francisco was the first time they used him as the dime linebacker, and he showed up. He's formidable against running backs. He can loop around because he's a good athlete, so you can use him on line games and things like that to create pressure. That was where he stood out initially. He struggled in coverage a bit early on, but then later on in the season, he was targeted deep, didn't let up like anything. I think all three of the pass breakups he had on those downfield targets were plays where he was like trailing and managed to get his hands up late in the season. So there's some things there where you can see the instincts, you see the playmaking ability, and also against the run, he's more physical than I expected. And at like 230-ish pounds, he's a better fit at linebacker in Vrabel's system than a Juwan Bentley, who's like 250, or Jelani Tavai, who's like 245 or like closer to 250 range. And both those guys are approaching 30. And neither one of them is connected to this coaching staff. Mike Vrabel could very easily say, hey, thank you for what you've done. We're moving on. You're just not fits in our system. You trade them, whatever. So I think Christian Ellis makes a lot of sense in this system. At the very least, he's one of the best special teamers in the league. He was on Bill Belichick's like all special teams unit around like mid-end of the season for the coaches podcast. So keep him at the very least as a special teamer and then see if you can continue to develop him with better coaching as either a coverage linebacker or maybe even as an every down linebacker. I think he's replacement level starter at best, but I do think that as a rotational piece, he could give you some pretty good football.
All right. I agree. I like it. And with that, let's go rapid fire on the rest of them before we wrap this up with a couple more mailbag questions that trickled in from yesterday. A couple ERFAs, a couple unrestricted guys here, and a restricted one in Lester Cotton. But let's start with Trey Jacobs. Taylor, in or out, you're bringing him back.
Yeah, Trey Jacobs, I want to bring him back. I tried to justify it, but when you look at the numbers, it's really not good. He was one of the worst tackles in football. And I just think this regime, he does bring value as a swing tackle. Vidarian Lowe really is only a left tackle. But I think if you're going to have a swing tackle on this roster, maybe they bring Trey Jacobs as competition, but I think they're probably going to want to do better, whether that's through free agency, whether that's through the draft. Hopefully it's through both. So yeah, I just don't think they bring back Trey Jacobs, even though it would be easy. He's an exclusive rights free agent. So I'm very on the fence about this one, but I just, with the new regime, I'm thinking probably no.
Yeah, I think so too. But one ERFA, who I think could come back is Ben Brown. What say you? Especially with David Andrews kind of not questionable, and not that he's going to be your starting center. Cole Strange is in the mix too. But Ben Brown is an exclusive rights free agent. Would you bring him back?
I would, because Jake Andrews missed all of last season, wasn't really in the mix the year before that, so he's a complete unknown pretty much. Cole Strange, I think you're hoping is the future at that position, but with David Andrews' status up in the mix and the fact that Ben Brown has familiarity with with Drake May, and also played some pretty good ball last season and exclusive rights free agent. He's an older guy. I don't know how many other people are really going to be looking for his services, so I think he makes sense as a retention.
What about JaMychal Hasty, veteran running from Jacksonville, now here? Would you bring him back?
I wouldn't. I would like to see them just do better at running back and returner, period. I think JaMychal Hasty had some flashes, but it wasn't nearly enough for me to think that this new regime is going to, work too hard to bring him back.
Easy enough. All right, someone who last year was cut by the Giants, I believe, and then the Patriots brought him in on waivers. So I have that right?
I think they signed him as a free agent. He told me he didn't really have any other offers in free agency.
Oh, that's what. Okay, sounds good. But an unrestricted free agent now. He tore his ACL last season. Got off to a decent start. Came in during training camp. And would you bring him back or would you let him walk?
I say yes, that he comes back only because he worked on his body to be better as a defensive end or an edge presence. Ryan Cowden's familiar with him from the Giants, his Giants tenure, and also they just have no edge depth. Now, this could very easily go to a player, again, that Terrell Williams is more familiar with. Honestly, I'm going to switch this one. I'm actually probably going to say out. I think maybe the Rams want him because of Drew Wilkins as a depth piece or something like that. But yeah, I think it would make sense to bring him back, but I also think it makes a ton of sense not to. And given the fact that he didn't actually do anything in the regular season, I'm not sure this regime is going to see him as valuable enough to, really try to retain.
Yeah, if they retained Drew Wilkins, that would have made more sense. He went from the Giants with him, they were together on the Giants together here. Now he goes to LA. So I agree that he's probably out. All right, last two, we'll group them together because frankly, I don't think a lot of people in the chat knew who they are. But interior offensive lineman Lester Cotton and wide receiver Jaquay Jackson. Would you bring either of those guys back?
No, just because I think you can do better at both ends of the spectrum. Wide receiver, I hope you bring in with both positions. I think you need to draft someone and you need to bring in free agents. So maybe as camp bodies, but if I, water gun to my head, I'm saying they're probably out.
Yeah, I am with you. Two guys who Jackson got hurt in the preseason last year. Is that right?
Yeah. It looked terrible. I don't think it was as bad as it looked. I remember I put in the group chat. I thought the poor guy broke his leg. It looked horrible, but it didn't seem as bad because he was walking around last year.
Right. Tough stuff. All right, let's finish it off with a mailbag. We asked for questions yesterday, but we got way too into it, so we couldn't get to all of them. But we'll answer a couple more quickly here before we get out of here. If anyone has anything pressing in the chat and wants to ask, we'll try and get to those as well. But we will start off here. And I don't really agree with the premise here, but we'll use it as a vessel to talk about Ted McMillan. Why hasn't anyone in Boston sports media talked about Ted McMillan? He seemingly fills a major need for the Patriots and is consensus top 5. What are your thoughts on Ted? Should they be thinking about him at the 4th pick?
I think 4 is tough, man. If they really can't trade out, maybe consider it depending on how the offseason goes. But really, I feel comfortable with Tet if they get Josh Sweat, if they get Milton Williams, if they get a tackle and a left guard that they're comfortable with. Like if you can go into the draft not needing desperately trench additions, I'm fine with Ted because I don't think that T. Higgins is going to be on the board. And I think Ted is the best receiver in this class, and there's pretty significant drop-off. I think the reason Ted isn't mentioned enough is because, one, I think people are kind of wising up to how important the trenches are after the Super Bowl and really realize this is where their attention needs to be focused. There's also the Travis Hunter element where if you want a receiver, you probably like Travis Hunter more because he gives you more big playability. He has the versatility to play both sides of the ball, yada, 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 and all those things. And then you look at like Mason Graham, Will Campbell. It's just if you want trench guys, you can make a very good case for either one of them at this pick. And wide receiver is still a huge need, but I'm trench first. So I understand the mentality of maybe wanting to get a receiver later in the draft. But I will say, I think Tet is very misunderstood. I think because he's not Brian Thomas Jr. or Marvin Harrison Jr. or Roma Dunze, people think that he's really just like a N'Keal Harry type or something like that because he's big. This guy moves with crazy fluidity for a guy who's his size. Like he moves like T. Higgins, but he's bigger than T. Higgins. And T. Higgins already looks crazy. His ability to shift and drop his weight on a dime, change directions really quickly without really needing to take a ton of steps. Their yards after catch ability, where as soon as they get that ball, they're looking upfield, they're fighting through contact, they're trying to make a play. I see a lot of similarities between him and T. Higgins, but where T. Higgins has more vertical ability, one, I think Ted McMillan, like once he gets striding, it's tough to catch up to him. And he's got a much bigger catch radius than T. Higgins, who's already known for having a big catch radius.
Right.
Now, one thing I would really like to see more from Ted McMillan is him using his physicality to win in routes. Like I did a breakdown of him versus Travis Hunter in 2023. And I was really disappointed because Travis Hunter was all over him, but I'm thinking, dude, you need to initiate contact like what tight ends do, like we see with Hunter Henry all the time. And Gronk used to do it all the time. He runs at guys because he wants you to try to lock him up, because once you grab onto him, he's allowed to chop you off him. He can't push off, but he can chop off. And a guy that's 6'5", 215 pounds, not a lot of corners are going to be able to do a whole lot against that. So I'd love to see him be more physical, because that's what I think he's going to be a load to deal with. I also would like to see him be a little more diverse in his release packages. But again, with his size and physicality and being pretty fleet of foot for a guy who's 6'5", I think he's going to be a legit number one receiver in the NFL. And everything that Vrabel mentioned he wanted. He wants a separator. He wants a catch radius. He wants yak ability. Tet gives you all of those things, even if he's not an elite burner or anything like that. So I think that's why people don't talk about him much. They misunderstand him. People want trenches. And if they want a receiver, they're probably going to want Travis Hunter more. I would much rather take Tet McMillan after a trade down. But if the Patriots said he's our guy at 4, and again, the trenches were pretty solidified, I wouldn't be mad at it.
And that's the part where I hate giving the cop-out answer, but it's kind of where we're at in the process right now, because it is only February 11th. Like, we don't know what they're going to tackle in free agency. So, if they go get T. Higgins, or if they go get Darius Slayton, or if they go attack the wide receiver position, then no, I wouldn't take him at number 4. But if they don't do anything that, and they do figure out the trenches, or there's Will Campbell meshes in with 55-inch arms and he goes number 2, like something like that, right? Where he just moves up the board and he's still sitting there. Taking it at 4, you need a wide receiver. He is a solid player. I like that you mentioned the Mike Vrabel's idea of, a number 1 wide receiver. He fits that mold perfectly. So does AJ Brown. That's not going to happen, but that was it sounded like he was talking exactly about AJ Brown when he mentioned that. But yeah, I would consider him at number 4, depending on what they, what needs they have when that time ultimately comes. You mentioned the trenches, so let's go to this. What Patriots line do you think is worse off right now? Is it offense? Is it defense? And because of that, where would you lean at, at the top of the draft?
I would say the offensive line is in a worse spot, because at least on the defense, assuming Christian Barmore is healthy, you can at least pencil in a starting 4. Keon White, Devon Gottschalk, Christian Barmore, Anthony Jennings. There's guys where Keon White needs to mature, but he's a good pass rusher. He can give you some good run defense, but he's inconsistent. Gottschalk, great run defender. Jennings, great run defender. Barmore, pretty much good at everything. So you've got a solid mix of versatility and guys who can stop the run. But then the issue arises in pass rush situations where Keon kicks in and then, oh no, we have no edge rushers. That's a huge issue. But at the same time, on the offensive side of the ball, you don't have any really starters you can depend on other than Mike Nwenu. David Andrews, we have no idea what's going to happen with him. Cole Strange played some really good ball at center, but he's inexperienced and still hasn't played a ton of NFL football. Layden Robinson, we talked about it ad nauseum. He played better at the end, but still wasn't good enough for you to say left guard is fixed. And both of your tackle spots are question marks, even though I think that Caden Wallace can fill in either at right tackle, left tackle, guard. I think he's going to have a role on this offensive line when he's healthy and if he takes to coaching. So I think it's the offensive line once again, because you're talking about 3 to 4 spots that you're not feeling comfortable with, whereas the defensive line, it's more like 2, and then you'd like depth. If it's the offensive line, I would lean more towards Campbell or Mason Graham. If it's 4 and I had to make a pick, I would rather Mason Graham. I think that he is more of a game changer and someone whose limitations aren't as jarring as someone like Will Campbell, just because with Mason Graham, he'll stall out as a pass rusher against really big guys who can move, but you're not going to really move him on double teams very often, which is the biggest thing with a smaller guy. And he's so nuanced as a pass rusher. He's got such great body control, and he's got so many tools that I don't really worry about his lack of size as much as a Will Campbell, where I think he's got the footwork and intelligence to make up for the lack of length. And I know that's going to be talked about a ton, right? But you're talking about a top 4 pick. I think Mason Graham can go to Pro Bowls. I think Will Campbell, I don't know if he's a Pro Bowl left tackle. A guard? Hell yeah. I think he's absolutely a Pro Bowl guard. I think at left tackle, though, he's going to be a guy who's really good, but is really never going to hit that Pro Bowl ceiling. So I would rather a trade down, period. The only player I would take it for and be like, yes, sprint, sign me up, is Abdul Carter.
Right.
Everybody else, I would hope, Travis Hunter.
If Travis Hunter's there, do you take him or do you trade back?
I trade back. Still? I've been watching his corner tape. Like, he moves so well. I get it. I think he could be locked down. I'd rather have a defensive tackle or an edge rusher who can impact the game as a rusher and potentially also as a run defender versus Travis Hunter, where he's not going to give you much in run defense. And yes, he's going to make plays for you as a corner, but my preference personally is trenches over the back end or receivers. So it's I can't, it's almost impossible for me to say Travis Hunter, even though I think he's going to be a really good player.
I mean, you saw it in the Super Bowl how important the trenches are, and I know that's the talking point this week, and it's the obvious one. But I mean, even with Kansas City, who has all things considered a pretty good offensive line, they were just in hell against 4. They got pressure with 4 from that Philly defensive line. It's like, and they got there because their offensive line, both offensive lines were solid, and then it was essentially who was the better between the KC offense and the Philly defense. And I want to clear something up. Obviously, I was joking about a 55-inch arm length. The point was that everyone thinks Will Campbell has short arms. If he comes in with a long arm length, then it changes the conversation. But anyway, one last question, Taylor, before we get out of here. It's a multiple question one, but I guess what's the blueprint for you for fixing the offense? We've talked about T. Higgins every mailbag, so if you want to add it in, go for it. But essentially, using this question with the back end of it, are they better off trading for an older vet like Deebo Samuel, who was on the market? What's your thought on like the Deebo Samuel, Cooper Kupp aspect of this veteran wide receiver market that is kind of coming into picture right now for the Patriots?
I just don't think a team that has so many holes should be spending $30 million on one receiver who has a history of soft tissue injuries. I'm sorry, I can't get on.
No, it makes sense.
I've gone back and forth on T, and I know, some people may think it's finicky or fickle or whatever, but like, it does change. Like, every day something happens, whether it's in the news or especially when we were watching ball. And I'm just like, man, I really want T. Higgins and I want Drake to have that guy where when he throws the 50-50 ball on the post, a guy who can actually go up and grab it, who's done it at the NFL level and we know is a really good player. But also, I would love to see them get like 3 offensive linemen, a good receiver like a Darius Slayton, who's not going to, kill another team necessarily in terms of his production and whatnot, but he's still a good player who's going to be great for the locker room. And then also add to the defensive trenches. And I know they got like $120 million in effective cap space. I like to think of that as more of $100 million because you got to save some money for, in-season acquisitions, draft picks and things like that. So I try to kind of keep it safe. And you can mess with the cap a lot, but still, you're not going to sign like 5 players to $20 million deals. That's just probably not going to happen. So I don't like allocating the money to T. Higgins. And then when it comes to Deebo, I just am not – I'm over Deebo at this point. If you can get the guy for no money and like a 7th-round pick or like a pick swap on day 3, maybe. Yeah, sure. But I don't think he's even like a Cooper Kupp where he comes in and can be like a coach in the wide receiver room and on the field who really elevates everyone because Deebo's never been that guy. He's never been a technician. He's been a baller, and he's one of the best at what he does ever in that like Cordero Patterson kind of role or Devin Hester where it's like
type of player, yeah.
Exactly. Not Devin Hester necessarily, but you know what I mean, where I think Deebo's more of a better wide receiver than that, but he's more of like a football player. Whereas like a Cooper Kupp, that dude works to perfect his craft like no other, and I think would really elevate a lot of young players around him. So I'm not in on Deebo. T. Higgins, I'm not in on at the price he's probably going to come at. My blueprint, get the best players you can on the offensive line. I think that on both sides of the ball, but offense specifically, I think that means Trey Smith. He's probably the best offensive player who's going to hit the market. Tackle, I think you probably just go with like a Dan Moore, someone who's not super expensive. You're probably not going to give him a deal that you're locked into, and you can sign somebody where age isn't as much of a concern and like injuries and things like that. Like Cam Robinson, you're going to pay him $17 million. I just don't think he's good enough to be paying $17 million to. I just don't. And I'd like to see that money maybe go somewhere where it makes more sense. It's kind of nitpicky there, but that's just what I feel like. So fix the trenches. Get receivers and pass catchers who are reliable, who can maybe give you a downfield element. But more than anything, like I want the guys you can rely on in tough situations who are experienced and who can pick up on Josh McDaniels' offense and be positive presences around Drake May.
And on that note, we got to go. But good stuff.
Also, with Will Freeze, I got to say this because Pat Stat says this every week.
Yeah.
That dude broke his tibia. I think it was his tibia. Will Freeze. Tibia. What the hell? Will Fires, not Will Fires. Yeah, he had surgery on a serious tibia injury in October. I'm sorry.
Like
no, thank you.
Yeah,
I hope he signs a
no.
1-year deal with the Colts and is able to prove himself or whatever. But like, I don't really love the idea of the Patriots investing in many players with significant injury histories or who are coming off big injuries.
I'm with you. But no, you're right. No, that is the blueprint. Go with the offensive line. Maybe not Will Freeze as he does have the tibia injury. But I am leaning that way now with the wide receivers. I hate saying build it through the draft because they're cheaper, but especially because of their track record, their history there with, obviously Jalen Polk last year, Javon Baker not coming in great, N'Keal Harry, Tyquan, all those guys, you name them. They haven't been good in the department, but you do also kind of got to keep throwing darts. Eventually they'll hit on one. But again, that's a conversation for another day. And we'll be back tomorrow here on Patriots Daily. We will be doing wait, don't tell me. I'm mind blank. Oh, we're going to look at the scheme changes the Patriots could go through. Everything's kind of going into one right here. But new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. So we're going to take a look at what those guys have done in the past and how the Patriots could take a little bit of everything from what they've done and mold it into their own. So we'll be back at some point later tomorrow afternoon, I believe. We'll hash that out and we'll get that out to you guys as soon as possible. So as always, thank you all so much for tuning in to Patriots Press Pass and Patriots Daily. We'll be back tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And we'll see you next time. Peace out, everyone.